When I accidentally wore the same outfit as my fiancé's childhood sweetheart, he immediately had someone strip Ivy of her clothes on the spot. He then forced Ivy to sign a written pledge, guaranteeing she would never again use the same items as Sailor. Countless malicious gazes fell upon her exposed, flawless body. Ivy's heart clenched violently, an unprecedented sense of humiliation nearly drowning her. She desperately shielded her private parts, gritted her teeth as she signed the agreement, and glared at Marlon with bloodshot eyes. "Can I put my clothes on now?" "You may." Marlon leisurely exhaled a smoke ring, the amusement in his eyes utterly heartbreaking. "But it'll come at a price." With that, he signaled his bodyguard to bring over a puppy costume. "You like stealing Sailor's spotlight, don't you? I'll give you this opportunity. Put this on, and we'll consider the matter closed." A beam of white light suddenly illuminated Ivy, so blinding it took her breath away. As if to nail her permanently to the pillar of shame, she had lost count of how many times Marlon had chosen to side with Sailor against all reason. At 18, Sailor failed the college entrance exam. Marlon switched her exam results with Sailor's, freezing her academic credentials at high school level forever. At 20, Sailor drove drunk and hit someone. Marlon sent her to prison without hesitation, taking the blame for Sailor. At 23, Sailor plagiarized her designs. Marlon then spent money to buy media coverage, turning the tables to falsely accuse her of being the plagiarist. Now, just because of a wardrobe clash, Sailor cried all night, and Marlon stripped her down to her undergarments in front of everyone, letting these spoiled brats ogle her. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful novels every day. Now the story begins. What? Not willing. Marlon stubbed out his cigarette, his icy gaze making her tremble. Then don't wear anything at all. The private room erupted in a burst of raucous laughter. "Marlon, your little lapdog seems disobedient today. What do you know? I bet 100,000 that Ivy will be barking like a dog in less than a minute. Let's not wait that minute, let's give her a hand, boys." Before Ivy could react, Marlon's buddies forced her into a puppy costume. They pinned her firmly to the ground as vulgar insults filled the air. Ivy instinctively struggled. But Marlon's icy words whispered in her ear, "Don't forget our agreement." Her face drained of color, freezing her in place. When her mother remarried Mr. Newman, Marlon had forced her to sign an unfair contract, demanding Ivy's absolute obedience, threatening to weaponize the homewrecker scandal to destroy her mother otherwise. At that time, Mrs. Lemoyne was severely depressed with extremely strong suicidal tendencies. How could Ivy dare let Marlon provoke her? So she signed the agreement, thus becoming what the industry widely called the ultimate simp. Whenever Marlon asked, Ivy would give everything. Ivy didn't know how she made it back to the Newman family's villa, only aware of wearing an unwieldy puppy costume, covered in terrifying bruises. Tears mingled with blood smeared across her face, enduring the cold stares of passers-by, though her heart ached so fiercely it felt suffocating. The thought of her mother at home arranging flowers, eagerly awaiting her return with joy. Ivy brought a faint glimmer to those dull grey eyes, just as she changed clothes, steadied her emotions, and forced a smile to step into the yard. With a loud bang, a figure fell from above, landing right at her feet. Screams of terror erupted all around as Ivy slowly looked down, her pupils contracting violently. Amidst the lush greenery of spring, she saw her mother's face, covered in blood, eyes wide open in death. It stabbed straight into her eye. "Mom," muttering to herself. Ivy only then realized, her heart aching as if being tightly hooked by a claw. With a thud, she collapsed to her knees, trembling all over. She grasped Mrs. Lemoyne's hand, but the icy coldness that met her touch made her breath stop. Suddenly, she let out a desperate scream. "Mom!" Mrs. Lemoyne's phone screen was paused on the news page about Mr. Newman's affair. The Lemoyne family mother and daughter drove the original wife to suicide. Seduced the Newman family father and son to climb the social ladder. At the bottom of the news were anonymously provided Ivy and Marlon's years of hotel check-in records, along with videos of Ivy being humiliated everywhere. The malicious comments pierced Ivy's heart like ice picks. No wonder Mr. Newman got divorced back then. It turns out the mother-daughter vixens from the Lemoyne family seduced him. Homewreckers climbing their way up. Two shameless bitches. First they seduced Mr. Newman, and now they're after the young master too. That's not all. Those whores drove the first wife to her death. They're murderers, and Mrs. Lemoyne left her a recording in her dying moments. The content of the recording was simple, yet it made Ivy break down in tears. "Ivy, does it take my death for you to have a future?" Filled with rage, she dialed Marlon's number, wanting to ask him why, Those hotel records and videos are only in his possession and that of his rich second-generation friends. But Marlon just sneered, isn't what they're saying the truth? If your mother hadn't seduced my father, why would my mother have committed suicide? This is a life for a life. Ivy was filled with sorrow, yet back then, it was clearly Mr. Newman who forced his way through coercion and enticement, Mrs. Lemoyne into marrying him. Marlon never blamed his father, instead directing all his hatred and resentment toward her and her mother. How utterly ridiculous. Ivy stubbornly performed CPR on her mother countless times, deluding herself as she poured out her heart to her mother, trying to awaken those tightly shut eyes. Only when her voice grew hoarse beyond speech and her eyes swollen nearly to bleeding did she finally have to accept the fact that her mother had left her forever. Ivy numbly wiped the blood from Mrs. Lemoyne's body, then kept a dazed vigil by her mother's side for a full day and night, with a heart consumed by grief. After arranging her mother's funeral, Ivy dialed the number for the national figure skating team. Mr. Michael, I'm willing to compete in this international figure skating championship. Her mother had used her own life to send her away, then she would surely make every step of her future shine brilliantly. Mr. Michael immediately became excited. Ivy, once you agree, there's no turning back. I'll go make the arrangements right now. Ivy lowered her eyes. I won't go back on my word. This figure skating competition was being held in Vancouver, a city with a leisurely pace of life. Ivy planned to settle there after the competition, so she went to the immigration office to complete the immigration procedures. The immigration process would take a month, so she booked a flight to leave after that period. Meanwhile, her social media feed showed her Marlon's latest updates. It was the humiliating photo taken of her that night when she was insulted, a stark contrast to Sailor's glamorous and radiant beauty shots, accompanied by the caption, "A pheasant and a phoenix, of course the phoenix wins my heart." Ivy stared at the screen for a long time when it suddenly occurred to her that Marlon had favored her in the same way at first. Only his favor was terribly twisted. While driving away her bullies, he'd hurl cruel words at her, claiming her as his own while simultaneously molding her into an object of public scorn, a pathetic lapdog. While confiding his innermost thoughts to her, he remained constantly guarded against both her and her mother. That year, Ivy was 18, naively believing Marlon was just an immature boy who needed love to reform him, until Sailor returned home, and Marlon spilled his true feelings while drunk. "Sailor, I've missed you so much." Only then did she realize with sudden clarity that Marlon's erratic behavior stemmed from him using her as a substitute for Sailor. From that moment onward, Ivy felt all the flutter in her heart. Those tender emotions stirred when the young man had poured out his feelings to her with reddened eyes, turned to ashes. Ivy expressionlessly blocked them, then casually hailed a cab to return to the villa and pack her belongings. As soon as she stepped inside, she saw Marlon sitting in the living room with a dark expression. He flung a check in front of her. 10 million. Consider it compensation for you and your mother. I'll explain to the public that your mother committed suicide due to depression, unrelated to the Newman family. Hearing this, Ivy laughed in anger. What kind of nonsense is this? Blood money from a murderer. She tore up the check without hesitation and turned to go upstairs, but Marlon suddenly grabbed her wrist. Ivy, after making Sailor so miserable, how dare you throw a tantrum here? Or do you think 10 million isn't enough? Marlon threw another stack of bills at her face, his tone dripping with contempt. Money, the Newman family has plenty, but if you're delusional enough to think you'll marry me, forget it. Ivy's cheek stung from the impact, yet she calmly met his furious gaze. Marlon, I never once thought of marrying you. My mother never wanted to marry your father in the first place. Seeing her stubborn refusal to yield, Marlon laughed in furious exasperation. Ivy, don't think just because your mother's dead, I've lost my leverage over you. Mark my words, you'll regret this. With that, he slammed the door and stormed off. The next day, Ivy was immediately surrounded by a swarm of reporters the moment she stepped outside. Ms. Ivy, is it true that your mother was the other woman who broke up a marriage? Ms. Ivy, Marlon accuses you of interfering with his arranged marriage to the heiress of the Herman family. Do you have any response? Ms. Ivy, did your mother commit suicide out of shame after being caught in bed with another man? The icy, piercing questions laced with venom threatened to rupture her eardrums. Ivy quickly came to her senses. Whether her mother was alive or dead, she remained Ivy's vulnerability. Yet Marlon, to maintain his grip on her, dared to slander the deceased. Ivy swiftly shook off the reporters and rushed to the nearest police station to file a report, but no one dared to take her case. She was even chased by police dogs in a frantic escape, her arms covered in bruises from falling to the ground. as the malicious rumors defaming her mother grew increasingly vicious. Ivy dialed Marlon's number. Half an hour later, she reappeared in the bar. The dazzling lights illuminated the crowd writhing wildly on the dance floor. Perfectly embodying the scene of debauched extravagance, Marlon sat in the most conspicuous center seat, casually scrutinizing her. "You have two choices, either continue being my dog, or I'll make sure your mother finds no peace even in hell." Ivy felt as if an invisible hand had viciously twisted her heart. But she couldn't afford to break with Marlon just yet. She had to escape. Biting the soft flesh inside her cheek, she nodded in humiliation. "I'll keep obeying you. Now honor your promise, retract the public smear campaign." Marlon had a faint smile in his eyes. "Then let me see your sincerity. Now, in front of everyone, kneel and apologize to Sailor, and I'll let you off this time." Her fingers dug into her palms, but Ivy seemed numb to the pain. Step by step, she approached Sailor. With a thud, she knelt down, her voice trembling with barely suppressed emotion. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have worn the same outfit as you, stolen your spotlight, and made you sad for days. Please forgive me." Bystanders whispered among themselves, their eyes darting between Ivy and Sailor. "My God, this is the first time I've seen someone kneel to apologize for a fashion clash. Marlon spoils Sailor way too much. A simp is just a simp. In the end, they'll have nothing left to lick." Ivy kneeled in the crowd, her heart bleeding with pain. Meanwhile, Sailor instructed the waiter to bring 10 bottles of strong liquor and said with a beaming smile, "Ms. Ivy, as long as you finish all the alcohol here, I'll forgive you." Her innocent doll-like face radiated with bright laughter, yet Ivy could clearly see the wickedness and triumph gleaming in her eyes. Ivy instinctively turned to Marlon, about to remind him of her alcohol allergy, but Marlon seemed to anticipate her words, his thin lips curling into a sneer. "So what if you're allergic to alcohol, Ivy? No one here is going to indulge you." His words were as venomous as ice. As if it weren't him, Marlon, who smashed the glass from her hand years ago, furious that she didn't know how to take care of her own health. Ivy didn't speak again, silently pouring alcohol down her throat. The high-proof liquor nearly burned a hole through her stomach, the pain twisting her brows and sending cold sweat streaming down her face. 10 bottles of hard liquor later, whatever remained between her and Marlon had been scorched to ashes. Ivy forced back her discomfort, her eyes bloodshot as she glared at him. "Are you satisfied now?" "Satisfied." Marlon pulled Sailor's slender waist closer, his tone dripping with indulgence. "Darling, how else do you want her to apologize to you?" Sailor flushed crimson, casting a disdainful glance at Ivy. "How about making her change into a maid outfit and let our friends here experience some kneeling service?" As if that wasn't enough, Sailor added with a smirk, "Don't worry, Ms. Ivy. As long as you entertain my friends well, I'll have Marlon pay you for your service. How about we calculate it at 3,000 per hour, just like the price of that bottle of wine your mother stole from my house?" Hearing this, Ivy's face turned deathly pale. As an art student, her tuition and training fees were dozens of times higher than regular students. At that time, Mr. Lemoyne had just passed away, leaving no one to support the family. Mrs. Lemoyne, to fulfill her dream, she became a nanny at Herman's house through an agency's introduction, but her striking looks repeatedly led to harassment by Mr. Herman. She was even framed by Sailor with theft accusations and driven out. Her mother lived a tragic life. From stealing wine to stealing men, it ultimately drove her to suicide. The victim is burdened with guilt, while the perpetrator remains untroubled by conscience. How ironic is that? Ivy gritted her teeth, her tone suddenly sharp. "My mother didn't steal any wine, let alone cheat on anyone." As soon as these words were spoken, another wave of mocking laughter erupted. Only Marlon frowned unhappily. "Ivy, are you still going to quibble now? Do you still want to say that Sailor wronged your mother? You'd better be clear. Spreading rumors is against the law, then call the police." Ivy looked at him coldly. "Let the police investigate who is spreading rumors." Marlon looked at Ivy mockingly. "Unfortunately, this is City A, and I call the shots. Before I lose my patience, Sailor, you'll do exactly what you're told." Ivy's eyes welled with tears as she finally resigned herself to putting on the maid's uniform. Her beautiful face endured slaps after slaps, her clean hands holding goblets filled with malice, her self-esteem ground into dust. Only when everyone had left did Marlon relent. "Next time, the consequences won't be so simple." With that said, he wrapped his arm around Sailor's waist and got into the car. The car soon began to shake violently, occasionally emitting sounds of passionate lovemaking. In a daze, Ivy seemed to see the past. Marlon forced her to engage in wild intimacy in the car, uttering harsh words while seemingly wanting to crush her into pieces. Ivy had thought that he felt at least some love for her. It was just out of guilt toward Mrs. Newman that he had said such hurtful things. Little did she know, Marlon simply wanted to defile her, to take revenge on her. Her vision blurred with tears. Ivy saw darkness before her eyes and fainted. When she woke again, she found herself suspended 100 meters in the air. A single glance downward sent waves of terrifying weightlessness crashing over her. Ivy widened her eyes in horror. Struggling to scream for help but only managing muffled whimpers through the gag, the biting cold wind lashed against her frail body, making her sway unsteadily. It wasn't until the downpour began that Marlon's icy voice finally came from above. "Ivy, I truly underestimated you. I asked you to come apologize. Yet you brought a hidden camera to record everything. But do you really think any media outlet in this city would dare oppose the Newman family's conglomerate? Who would broadcast that footage for you?" Hearing this, Ivy felt her heart turn cold. She should have thought of this earlier. Marlon had connections in both the underworld and legitimate circles. No one dared risk their lives to cross him. Yet even so, Ivy still clung to hope. May someone be like her, even if alone facing the long night, still pursue the justice and fairness lost in time and darkness. Marlon's voice rang out coldly. "Ivy, you'll pay for your foolishness." The ropes binding her suddenly loosened, and Ivy felt like she was on a free-fall ride, a sudden plunge, then a slow ascent. Finally, at the most unexpected moment, it crashes down hard once more. This cycle repeats, each time testing death's limits. Anger, grievance, despair, these complex emotions intertwine in her chest. Ivy, yet even the right to voice them is denied. Was Mother this tormented when she found no way to call for help? That's why she chose death without hesitation. After what felt like an eternity, Ivy was finally dragged onto the rooftop by bodyguards. She collapsed onto the ground in a daze, slowly raising her head to gaze at the man before her. Bitter tears streamed down as Ivy choked back a bitter laugh. "Marlon, what exactly do you want? To finally let me and my mother go." She no longer wanted to live this life where each waking moment hung by a thread, nor did she want her mother to bear the infamy of moral depravity even after death. Least of all did she want the darkness and decay to extinguish the courage and strength in her heart that still pursued the light. She only wanted to clear her mother's name before leaving, then pursue her dreams and bring honor to her country. Watching Ivy's nearly desperate gaze, Marlon grew somewhat irritable and instinctively reached out to pull her, but suddenly coming to his senses, his expression turned cold. "Ivy, you'll never escape me in this lifetime." With that, he turned and walked away without looking back. Ivy sat alone on the rooftop for a long time, not even noticing when Marlon had left. The next day, Marlon publicly announced his engagement to Sailor and embarked on a pre-wedding trip. The beach, the sea, the sunset, all became witnesses to their love. Meanwhile, Ivy recovered from her injuries quickly and simply went through the hospital discharge procedures. First, she returned to the Newman family old house to pack her belongings. Then ventured alone into the deep mountains to unwind. For the following week, Ivy lived a fulfilling and pleasant life, but she never expected to encounter Marlon and Sailor's group hiking in these remote mountains. Ivy initially intended to pretend she hadn't seen them, but Marlon commanded, "I'll give you 100,000, lead the way." Selfish, arrogant, and utterly conceited, Ivy couldn't fathom what she had ever seen in him. Just as she was about to refuse, a flash of white light streaked across the sky, and savage lightning bolts slashed down like frenzied swords. Bang! It sliced straight through the hills and trees directly ahead. The worst part was that a few stray sparks flew up, setting the entire mountain forest ablaze. "Run!" Ivy instinctively shouted and was the first to run toward the foot of the mountain. The others reflexively followed her, but no one could keep up with her speed. Some even panicked and were swept into the sea of flames, meeting their demise. In the end, only Marlon and Sailor managed to stay close to Ivy. Scorching flames lashed out wildly, burning bright blisters on Ivy's exposed skin. The fire licking the ground seared the skin on her calves, leaving behind fiery marks. She was almost within reach of safety when a brute force yanked her back. Marlon commanded her heartlessly, "Slow down." Sailor's foot got cut. Ivy followed his gaze and immediately laughed in exasperation. A tiny scratch that didn't even draw blood, how does that qualify as a cut? They don't want to live, but she does. Sailor nearly burst into tears upon hearing this. "Marlon, am I holding you back? It's okay, you go ahead first, I'll catch up." But at that very moment, a burning tree suddenly toppled toward them. "Watch out!" Marlon abruptly pushed Ivy into harm's way, while he himself scooped up Sailor and dashed toward the foot of the mountain. His departing figure was resolute, without a trace of hesitation. Meanwhile, Sailor, cradled in his arms, cast a triumphant smile at Ivy, as if taunting her. Your life or death means nothing to Marlon. At this moment, Ivy heard the unmistakable sound of her heart shattering. A searing pain shot through her back. Her vision darkened completely, and she passed out. When she opened her eyes again, Ivy was wrapped in bandages from head to toe, gasping in pain. The doctor was briefing Marlon on her injuries. MS. Ivy has suffered extensive burns and will require skin grafts. Ivy had assumed Marlon would refuse to authorize the skin grafts for her, yet he agreed to the doctor's request. Her lifeless heart stirred with waves. But Marlon's next words sent a violent tremor through her. However, the skin graft must be performed without any anesthesia. Whether she can endure it depends entirely on her fate. Ivy felt as if a knife were twisting in her heart, her eyes red as if about to bleed. She struggled to speak. Why? But what answered her was Marlon's furious accusation. How dare you ask why? If you hadn't left without waiting for her, how could she have almost been crushed by that tree? You should be grateful you took that tree for her. Otherwise you'd be lying in the morgue right now. So I'll let you live, but you must live in agony. Every word was a blade to the heart. Ivy closed her eyes and suddenly laughed. Laughter turned to tears that fell in large, heavy drops. She was wheeled into the operating room with numb indifference, like a soulless shell. As the operating room doors closed, several nurses stepped forward to restrain Ivy, pinning her firmly to the surgical table. Ivy didn't struggle, lying still with empty eyes fixed on the ceiling. The moment the knife cut into her skin, excruciating pain instantly surged through her entire body. Ivy's body instinctively trembled, but she gritted her teeth without making a sound. The blade slowly sliced through her skin inch by inch, blood flowing from the wound and staining the operating table red. Her fingers gripped the edge of the bed so tightly they turned white, her nails nearly digging into her flesh. Yet she never uttered a single sound. Her consciousness gradually blurred, leaving only the cold, mechanical beeping of the monitors in her ears. Ivy was awakened by the chatter of nurses. Marlon is so good to Miss Sailor. Not only did he clear out the entire top floor for her, but he also comes every day to accompany her and even feeds her meals. Yes, I heard they're getting married in 2 weeks. What a perfect match of talent and beauty. That Ivy, the homewrecker who came between Marlon and Miss Sailor, must be fuming with rage by now. Haha. Ivy remained silent throughout, listening quietly while counting down the days until her departure. No more, no less, just half a month remained. The hospital room door suddenly swung open as Sailor sauntered in leisurely. Her rosy complexion hardly looked like someone who needed hospitalization. Ivy curled her lips. You were deliberately stalling for time on the mountain back then, weren't you? Yes, Sailor admitted readily, her smile brimming with smugness. What a pity though, you actually managed to cheat death. You've seen it yourself. Marlon's true love is me. You're just a plaything he can discard anytime. How dare you stay by his side for so long? With that, she suddenly began slapping her own face violently. Between slaps, she wailed tearfully, MS, Ivy, if you have any grievances, take them out on me. I can apologize to you, but you can't hurt my family. First your mother seduced my father, and now you're trying to seduce him too. Are you determined to tear our family apart? Ivy was utterly stunned. She was just about to reach out to stop Sailor's actions when the rushing Marlon forcefully intervened. Sailor threw herself into his arms, tears streaming down her face like pear blossoms in the rain, looking utterly shaken. Marlon, I only came to visit Miss Ivy out of kindness. Yet she harbored such malice toward me. She even said she would not only take you away but also steal my father. You know how my father once coveted her mother. He'd have no resistance against her. What would happen to my mother then? Marlon, could you please talk some sense into her? Marlon looked at Ivy in disbelief, his fury like a raging inferno that seemed ready to consume the entire hospital room. Ivy, you're absolutely hopeless. Ivy opened her mouth to explain, but Marlon wouldn't listen. He even raised his hand and slapped her hard across the face, leaving her cheek swollen and red. He said coldly, you and your mother are truly cut from the same filthy cloth. Why didn't she take you with her when she died? Since you're so fond of sleeping with men, I'll grant you your wish. With that, he picked up Sailor and walked away without so much as a glance at Ivy. Ivy's pupils suddenly contracted, as if all the blood in her body had frozen in that instant, because shortly after Marlon left, a group of ragged beggars burst into her hospital room. Their eyes gleamed with greedy malice, their limbs coiling around Ivy like venomous snakes, roughly tearing at her clothes and trampling her dignity. Ivy's body trembled uncontrollably as tears streamed from her eyes. Marlon, save me, Please, don't leave me here." Ivy threw herself toward the door with all her strength, trying to grab the hem of Marlon's clothes, but the moment her fingers brushed against his sleeve, he coldly shook her off. Mistakes must be paid for. Ivy knelt on the ground upon hearing this, kowtowing frantically, her forehead hitting the floor with dull thuds. "Marlon, I was wrong. Let me out. I can't stay with these men. I'll die, Marlon," she screamed in agony and despair, tears mingling with blood as they dripped down, staining the floor crimson, but Marlon only sneered. "A filthy body like yours has no right to be picky." With that, he walked away without a backward glance, as if she were something vile. The beggars frantically lunged forward, dragging Ivy onto the bed, their heavy panting and wild, sinister laughter pressing down on her. Her mind kept replaying Marlon's vicious taunt, "With a filthy body like yours, what right do you have to be picky?" Her heart felt as if gripped by invisible hands, the pain so intense she could barely breathe. Just as she was on the verge of despair, a nurse rushed in with security guards and drove the beggars away. No sorrow is greater than a dead heart. Ivy couldn't shed a single tear. She curled up under the covers, covered in wounds. The only thing worth being grateful for was preserving her innocence. After who knows how long, she numbly stood up and walked to the window to gaze at the sky. If Mother could see her in this state now, wouldn't she be terribly disappointed too? As if connected by a mother-daughter telepathy, Ivy stumbled dazedly toward the cemetery. She wanted to visit Mother, to tell her how much pain and injustice she'd suffered, and then bid her final farewell. But when she reached the gravesite, she saw a group of people digging up Mrs. Lemoyne's tombstone. Mrs. Lemoyne's favorite flowers were smashed to pieces by them, and the photo on the tombstone was covered with dirt. Ivy, her heart clenched violently as she rushed forward to push them apart, screaming in utter devastation, "What the hell are you doing?" But how could her strength compare to that of a group of towering, burly men? They dragged her aside without mercy to restrain her, continuing to dig Mrs. Lemoyne's grave. "Did those beggars from last night not satisfy you enough? Now you're getting handsy with men again," came the mocking voice of Marlon from behind. Ivy turned toward the sound and saw Marlon and Sailor holding hands, fingers tightly interlaced. It stung her eyes and pierced her heart. Sailor smiled sweetly. "Ms. Ivy. The things you said yesterday were so harsh. It's only natural." Marlon got angry. "Punishing you wasn't enough. We couldn't forget to punish your mother too. When Marlon calms down, I'll have someone tidy up your mother's grave. How about that?" Her smug expression was utterly infuriating, and her words were like arsenic. Ivy felt her blood run cold as she stared at Marlon in disbelief. "Marlon, have you lost your mind? Come at me if you dare. What kind of coward digs up someone's mother's grave?" she screamed with all her might. Yet it couldn't compare to Marlon's casually uttered words. "Keep digging." A worker held Mrs. Lemoyne's urn and asked Marlon, "Marlon, what should we do with this urn?" "No." Ivy trembled violently. Summoning unexpected strength to break free from her restraints, she suddenly snatched Mrs. Lemoyne's urn and clutched it tightly to her chest. "Marlon, have you forgotten how my mother treated you? Who was it that took you to the hospital when you had a fever in the middle of the night? Who learned to cook just to make home-style meals for you? And who covered for you at school and pleaded with your father when you got into trouble? Have you forgotten all of this?" But Ivy could never forget. Since childhood, her mother had taught her that those who live under others' roofs must know their place, so she endured everything for Marlon, giving all she could for him. Even the proudest ideals and achievements were utterly abandoned just to please Sailor. Even her mother obeyed his every whim, foolishly hoping to melt his resentment with love. Yet who could have imagined that Mother waited until death without ever seeing Marlon show a single moment of tenderness? Seeing Ivy's red, swollen eyes, Marlon felt a rare pang of heartache and instinctively reached to wipe her tears as he used to. But Sailor grabbed his hand and cooed, "Marlon, didn't you promise to stand up for me?" As soon as the words fell, Marlon regained his senses and violently kicked Ivy in the chest. He coldly ordered, "What are you standing around for? Scatter this bitch's ashes to the wind." Ivy was knocked to the ground, her fingers pried open forcibly. "No." She struggled to get up and tried to snatch back the urn, but was Marlon violently shoved aside, forced to watch helplessly as they poured her mother's ashes into the filthy, stinking river. At that moment, her heart stopped beating. Ivy stumbled dazedly toward the empty urn, even the sensation of pain forgotten in her shock. "Ivy, you must be strong. Ivy, Mom loves you. Ivy, life is short. Be happy." Mother's words lingered in my ears like a spell, so warm, so enticing, to the point where Ivy actually entertained the thought of going to join her mother. "Have you learned your lesson?" The cold, selfish voice of Marlon echoed in her ears. But Ivy wanted to hear nothing, respond to nothing, nor know what Marlon intended to do next, because to her, Marlon had already destroyed her entire world. Nothing else matters anymore. Seeing Ivy showing no intention of acknowledging him, Marlon grew furious with humiliation. With Sailor fanning the flames nearby, Marlon, it seems Ms. Ivy refuses to admit her mistake even unto death. Is she challenging your authority? Bang! Marlon violently kicked away the tombstone at his feet, Mrs. Lemoyne's photo being ruthlessly crushed beneath his soul. Ivy, since you refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit, then what? Ivy said with a blank expression, suddenly forcing a miserable smile. I admitted my mistake, apologized, even kowtowed, but have you ever let me off? She truly couldn't understand. Why should someone who did nothing wrong have to kneel, kowtow, and apologize? Why do the guilty always walk free? This world has truly been unfair to her. Ivy slowly rose to her feet, staring directly at Marlon. How do you plan to punish me this time? Make me kneel in a maid's costume, find men to rape me, or force the people I care about to their deaths? She wearily closed her eyes, her voice barely audible in the wind. Marlon, I'm tired, kill me, somehow. Marlon felt a pang of unease, but Sailor suddenly said, Ms. Ivy, even if you're trying the self-injury scheme, don't joke like this. Nothing in life matters except death. We just played a few small pranks on you, no need to be so desperate. Marlon, you don't actually believe her self-injury act, do you? Marlon, the hesitation and conflict in his eyes vanished instantly as he sneered. Since you're asking for death, then go die. With that, he ordered the group of burly men to throw Ivy into the pit and bury her alive. Initially, the men hesitated, but then they heard Marlon shout, bury her, I'll take responsibility if anything happens. He refused to believe that Ivy wouldn't fear death when faced with it. Unexpectedly, Ivy didn't say a word, calmly allowing them to bury her alive. The mud mixed with rain fell heavily upon her, yet she never begged for mercy. Only when her face was about to be sealed by the dirt did Marlon irritably call for a stop. Ivy, we'll let you off this time. Reflect on your actions here tonight. With that said, he took Sailor and turned to leave. Ivy stared blankly and dazedly at the sky. Letting the rain wash away her tears, her mind was filled with memories of her mother. She loved bright flowers, so her mother planted a garden full of blossoms for her. She loved swinging, so her mother made a swing for her by hand and played wildly with her every day. When she said she was afraid the road ahead would be difficult, her mother would patiently teach her, do good deeds without asking about the future. Her mother taught well, and she learned well too. Yet it seemed that none of this could withstand the darkness before dawn. When the first golden light pierced through the clouds and shone upon Ivy's face, she seemed to hear her mother's words to her. Ivy, be strong, be kind, be happy. At this moment, the gloom dispersed as golden light broke through the clouds. Ivy felt reborn as she glanced at the vibrating phone beside her. Ms. Ivy, your immigration procedures have been completed. Please proceed with the final confirmation. Ivy, the national team has sent someone to pick you up. You may begin your journey now. 2 hours later, Ivy finally arrived at the place that had appeared in her dreams countless times. The coach solemnly placed the team badge that once belonged to her around her neck. Ivy, welcome back to the team. In the hospital, Marlon felt a sudden hollow ache in his chest. He frowned tightly. As if something important had silently slipped away from his life, Marlon clutched his phone desperately, instinctively wanting to call Ivy. But just as the call was about to go through, Sailor collided into him. She cried out in pain repeatedly. Even Marlon's phone was trampled to pieces. That call never managed to connect in the end. Sailor affectionately hugged him. Marlon, who were you just calling? No one. Marlon tried to cover up. I just suddenly remembered there's still some work at the company I haven't handled. The words came out before he even realized how unconvincing they sounded. Like a cheating husband caught red-handed, he felt extremely guilty. Sailor didn't think too deeply about it, looking at him with seductive eyes. Marlon, will you accompany me home for the family banquet tonight? Marlon smiled and patted her head, dotingly saying, all right. That evening, not only did Mr. Herman and Mrs. Herman appear together at the Herman family old residence, but even Mr. Newman was there. Marlon was somewhat surprised, faintly sensing that something significant was about to happen. Sure enough, Mr. Herman seized the moment to propose. Marlon, since you and Sailor are already engaged, why not move the wedding forward? Let's become family sooner. What do you say? Mrs. Herman chimed in. Exactly. If it weren't for that little tramp taking advantage of the situation back then, you and Sailor would have been married long ago. Now that you've dumped her, Isn't this the best news ever? Hearing this, Marlon felt somewhat dazed. Little bitch, are you talking about Ivy? But why does it sound so uncomfortable when he says it? Noticing his absent-minded expression, Mr. Herman said disapprovingly, Marlon, don't tell me you've never considered marrying our sailor. The atmosphere turned awkward for a moment. Sailor quickly smoothed things over. Dad, Mom. There's no rush about marriage. I believe Marlon won't let me down. As she spoke, she turned to Marlon with a gentle smile. Marlon, right. Gazing at Sailor's delicate, blushing face, Marlon found himself unexpectedly thinking of Ivy. Once upon a time, Ivy had also gazed at him with tender affection in her eyes, cautiously asking, Marlon, will you really marry me? Back then, though he had feelings for her, the thought of her mother made his eyes darken as he warned her, Ivy, you're overthinking it. But now, he gave Sailor a different answer. Yes. Throughout the meal, Marlon was distracted. No matter what conditions Herman's family proposed, he agreed to each one. In the end, even the wedding date between him and Sailor was set. As they parted, Sailor excitedly kissed him first. Marlon, thank you for being willing to marry me. Though he was about to marry the unattainable love he had yearned for over the years, Marlon felt an inexplicable heaviness in his heart. Devoid of any joy, he took out his phone, wanting to call Ivy, but hung up the moment the call went through. The long night was cold, with rain and memories falling together. In truth, he had once felt some fondness for Ivy and her mother. That year, when Ivy and Mrs. Lemoyne had just entered the Newman household, news arrived from abroad of his mother's death. From then on, he was convinced that Ivy and Mrs. Lemoyne were responsible for his mother's death, and he made their lives miserable. He had thought that Mrs. Lemoyne would regard him as a thorn in her side, just like the other canaries of Mr. Newman. Ivy was the bastard child competing with him for the family fortune. Yet, Mrs. Lemoyne would personally pick him and Ivy up from school every day, cook meals for him with her own hands, and even knit scarves for him in winter. She was so gentle that even Marlon's own mother couldn't match her kindness. Yet Marlon still felt this mother and daughter harbored ill intentions. Until he and Ivy were kidnapped together, and Mrs. Lemoyne charged in alone to rescue them, only to end up spending a month in the ICU. That month, Marlon was conflicted. For the first time, he imitated Mrs. Lemoyne's cooking style and personally made a bowl of porridge to bring to Mrs. Lemoyne. Mrs. Lemoyne said with heartache in her eyes, "Child, you've suffered so much these years, living perpetually in a world fraught with danger. How could it not break one's heart?" It was from that time onward that Marlon and Ivy's relationship began to thaw. He no longer woke up an hour early, instead pretending nonchalance as he left for school at the same time as Ivy. He no longer turned a blind eye to Ivy being bullied at school, instead fiercely drawing her into his own circle to protect her. He even stopped refusing Ivy's invitations, working part-time jobs together, visiting haunted houses, admiring flower fields. Life began to hold promise. Marlon was gradually becoming fascinated by Ivy, yet he always had a sharp tongue but a soft heart, which made Ivy furious. Once, he accidentally broke Ivy's favorite cup but stubbornly refused to apologize. Ivy cried for the first time ever. "This was the only gift my father ever gave me." She cried until her face was a mess, looking both adorable and pitiful. At that moment, Marlon heard his own heartbeat growing faster and faster. For the first time in his life, he felt flustered and at a loss. Thinking of this, Marlon couldn't help but laugh. After laughing, he felt particularly empty. Marlon lit a cigarette irritably, and through the swirling smoke, Ivy's radiant smile unexpectedly resurfaced in his mind. He decisively dialed his assistant's number. Arrange for a new tombstone to be made for Ivy's mother. After hanging up, Marlon instinctively wanted to tell Ivy about this. He longed to see her tears turn to joy, to witness her overwhelming gratitude, and to behold the adoration hidden in her eyes. But he couldn't bring himself to do it, so he had his assistant relay the matter to Ivy. Soon, the assistant came back with news. "Marlon, MS. Ivy is out of contact." Marlon's heart sank. "What do you mean? Have you looked for her, MS? Ivy has blocked all means of contact from everyone. Our people have checked all her usual haunts, even the cemetery, but she's nowhere to be found, according to the investigation, MS. Ivy should have gone abroad." With a boom, Marlon felt as if something inside him was collapsing. He frantically messaged and called Ivy, only to suddenly realize she had already blocked him. Immediately after, he sped all the way back to the villa, only to find everything about Ivy had been cleared away. Her slippers, cups, clothes, all were gone. Even her room had gathered dust. Only torn pieces of paper remained in the trash, a childhood photo of Marlon and Ivy together. Marlon could still faintly make out the words recorded behind the fragments. Ivy and Marlon, peace and safety year after year. It carried her most sincere blessing. Yet now, she had torn it all to pieces like trash and thrown it into the garbage bin. Marlon's heart skipped a beat as he reassured himself. Ivy must just be acting out of spite. Once she cools down, she'll probably come back obediently. Right, that's how it is. Marlon was utterly convinced of his personal charisma. Or perhaps it was because Ivy had once been so compliant that it gave him this confidence. Thus, he stayed at the old house for an entire week. Every time there was movement at the door, it sent his heart racing with anxiety. But the person who appeared behind that door was either a servant or the occasionally returning Mr. Newman. Marlon's heart hung suspended, rising and falling, never finding peace, until Sailor came to him, complaining, "Marlon, why haven't you been dating me lately?" Only then did he wake as if from a dream. Is he being led by the nose by Ivy? Realizing this, Marlon became furious with shame. He tossed Ivy's disappearance case to his assistant to investigate, while he resumed his carefree and indulgent lifestyle. For the following month, he and Sailor indulged in wild revelry. Bars became their second home, hard liquor turned into daily routine, and they even dabbled in gambling. They lived in day-night reversal, muddled through life in a daze, soberly descending into degeneration countless times. Yet Marlon couldn't stop himself from thinking of Ivy over and over. He thought of her radiant smile, her tender comfort, her vivid willfulness. He wanted to sleep with her, to break her apart, then force her to admit she still loved him. If missing had a sound, it would be deafening. Ivy on the third month of her disappearance, Marlon could no longer sit still. The assistant said, "Ms. Ivy bought plane tickets to destinations all over the world, and someone is helping her erase her tracks. Even our people can't find out where she's gone." Bang! Marlon smashed the cup on the table in anger and grabbed the assistant by the collar. "I don't care what methods you use or how much money it costs, you must bring her back to me. If you can't find Ivy, don't even think about staying in City A." The assistant was startled by his violent demeanor, his lips trembling uncontrollably. But he wanted to say that even if Marlon was the crown prince of City A, his influence couldn't reach overseas. But when he saw Marlon's murderous gaze, he instantly lowered his head. Yes, after the assistant left, Marlon finished a whole pack of cigarettes alone in the study. He wondered, when had he and Ivy started going their separate ways? Probably the day Sailor returned to the country. Marlon threw a welcome banquet for her, but didn't invite Ivy for fear she might misunderstand. Yet that very night, Sailor posed him 3 questions. "Marlon, have you forgotten your mother's death? Being with your mother's killer, aren't you afraid of chilling her spirit in heaven? Your father supported the mistress taking her place. Must you follow his example and break my heart too?" His scalp tingled as if countless ants were crawling over his heart, gnawing at him with unbearable discomfort. Back at the old house, Ivy confronted him again. "Marlon, why did you secretly throw Sailor a welcome party behind my back?" Marlon knew very well that Ivy was jealous. In the past, this would have been something that satisfied him. But in that instant, he instinctively pushed her away, his face darkening as he scolded Ivy. "Do I need your permission to host a welcome banquet for someone I've secretly admired for years? Our arranged marriage partner." Marlon still remembers how Ivy reacted at that moment, her expression so utterly disappointed and heartbroken. "What are you thinking about?" The study door opened as Sailor walked in wearing nothing beneath her nightgown. She walked up behind him with a smile and naturally began massaging his shoulders. "The assistant said you've been in a bad mood lately." Before she could finish, Sailor saw Marlon's phone screen displaying a photo of him and Ivy together. Her smile instantly froze, and her voice involuntarily rose. "Marlon, what are you doing?" Sailor's mind exploded with a thunderous shock, as if struck by lightning on a clear day. She had long noticed that Marlon had been acting very strangely lately. Not only was he neglecting his work, but he was also drowning his sorrows in alcohol all day. There were even some rumors saying that Marlon was desperately searching for Ivy's whereabouts. At first, Sailor didn't believe these absurd claims, though she had her doubts. But once the seed of suspicion is planted, it takes root and grows in the heart. So when she saw that Marlon was actually longing for Ivy behind her back, Sailor was somewhat devastated. Marlon quickly turned off his phone and softened his voice to coax her. "Sailor, let me explain, But when the words reached his lips, Marlon found himself at a loss. Just what? Just missing Ivy a little. Just worried Ivy might get hurt out there. Or does he want to sleep with Ivy? Seems like every one of these could be his true feelings. It precisely reflected his twisted psyche. But what? Sailor suddenly reddened, taking a deep breath. Marlon, are you remembering things from the past? Without waiting for Marlon's reply, she took the initiative to embrace him, her words gentle. I'm sorry. Marlon, it's all my fault. If only I hadn't gone abroad, if only I'd stayed by your side all these years. Otherwise, that scheming, treacherous woman Ivy wouldn't have been able to take advantage of the situation. Her words were sincere, and her tears were burning with emotion. Marlon was somewhat displeased with her calling Ivy a scheming, treacherous woman, but guilt still dominated his emotions. He reached out and pulled Sailor into his arms, saying tenderly, Sailor, this isn't your fault, it's my lack of resolve, but you must believe me, the one I've always loved is you. Sailor suddenly smiled through her tears. I believe you, you just treated Ivy as my substitute, right? Somehow, Marlon answered with difficulty. Yes, she was just a substitute, to prove his love to Sailor. Marlon deleted all his photos with Ivy right in front of her, but what he really thought was, it's okay, Ivy will come back to him, and they can just reshoot. However, contrary to his wishes, what arrived sooner than news of Ivy was the pressure to marry from Herman's family. After that night, Sailor struck while the iron was hot and moved the wedding up on the schedule. The wedding, originally planned for 6 months later, was abruptly moved up to just 1 month later by her. She took Marlon by the hand to personally oversee every wedding detail. Striving for perfection in each element, she wanted to marry Marlon in the most splendid way possible. To this, Marlon often teased her, so eager to get married. Sailor would respond with complete seriousness, because it's you I'm marrying, that's why it matters so much. In the past, Marlon would have been very happy to hear this answer, but now, he felt overwhelmed with pressure, unconsciously comparing Sailor and Ivy. Ivy never pressured him like Sailor did, on the contrary. She was perceptive and always attuned to his emotions, what to say and what to do. She never needed him to teach her. If Sailor was the leading lady of this play, then Ivy was its judge. She always examined everything with a rational gaze, then assessed the situation to make judgments and choices. At this thought, Marlon's heart seemed to be clenched tightly, throbbing with a sudden, sharp pain. He seemed to feel a pang of pity for Ivy. Because only those who cannot feel love would rationally prepare to withdraw at any moment. On the eve of the wedding, Marlon finally had some free time and suddenly felt like going on a date with Sailor. Just as he was about to call Sailor, he decided to give her a surprise. Thus, he arrived at the Newman family's VIP lounge in the shopping mall. Just thinking of Sailor's surprised and excited expression, Marlon's eyes couldn't help but warm by 3 degrees. Yet just before pushing the door open, he overheard the conversation and laughter inside. Sailor, no wonder you weren't the least bit worried about the recent rumors of Marlon rekindling his old flame with Ivy. So you'd already secretly killed that little bitch. Marlon's breath hitched, his hand frozen on the doorknob. What do you mean? Sailor killed Ivy. You're amazing. Not only did you completely bewitch Marlon, but you didn't hesitate at all when dealing with that vixen. Sailor drawled lazily with a smirk. Thanks to Marlon's ruthlessness back then, I merely added a little fuel after he left to ensure that little bitch was buried alive for good. A dead woman. How could she possibly rekindle old flames with Marlon? What's more, I had people fabricate the illusion that Ivy went abroad. Even if Marlon wanted to search for her, he'd never find her. With time, Marlon will gradually forget that bitch, and even feel guilty toward me, devoted to me for life. Speaking of which, don't forget to come to my wedding with Marlon tomorrow. Marlon stood frozen in place, not even noticing when his phone slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. In the lounge, the voices abruptly fell silent, followed by Sailor's wary question, who's out there? Marlon closed his eyes briefly before turning away, his face deathly pale. Returning to the top-floor executive office, Marlon's brow was tightly furrowed. His assistant cautiously asked, Mr. Marlon, should tomorrow's wedding proceed as planned? Though outsiders claimed Marlon and Sailor's relationship was unbreakable, the assistant could see Marlon's feelings for Ivy ran far deeper. Marlon pondered briefly. No, any news from Ivy's side? He couldn't believe that Ivy, someone so capable of saving herself, could have died so easily, unless she had chosen death. Suddenly, Marlon recalled the last time he saw Ivy. Most of her body was buried in the dirt pit. Her face an ashen grey devoid of life, the light in her eyes gone forever. Despair. Marlon's heart skipped a beat as if struck by a sudden thought, and he raced to the cemetery through the night. Ignoring the caretaker's protests, he recklessly charged toward Mrs. Lemoyne's grave. He ordered the earth dug up for miles around, all to search for traces of Ivy. 2 hours passed, Yet Marlon never found Ivy, yet Mrs. Lemoyne's grave was where they found Ivy's wristband. It was a gift from Marlon when he was 16, who traveled halfway across the country to Lingyan Temple to pray for her. Back then, his wish was simple, he only hoped for Ivy to be safe and happy. But now, her fate remains unknown. At this moment, Marlon's crumbling psychological defenses finally collapsed. Those beautiful moments of the past had built a palace in his heart, and the mistress of this palace was none other than Ivy. Now that Ivy was gone, these memories became as unreal as illusions. Marlon desperately wanted to grasp them, and thus had to confront his feelings for Ivy. At that moment, a clear yet absurd answer surfaced in his subconscious. He couldn't live without Ivy. He loved Ivy. The panic in Marlon's heart grew increasingly intense until the sudden ringing of the phone interrupted his thoughts. From the other end of the line came Sailor's cheerful voice. "Marlon, tomorrow is our wedding day. Are you nervous?" His eyes were icy cold. Yet his words came out tender beyond measure. "I'm looking forward to it." Her heart blossomed with joy at his sweet words, eagerly anticipating tomorrow's wedding. The next day, all the friends had gathered. Marlon and Sailor had both arrived at the wedding venue, as arranged by the proposal planner. Marlon stood at the end of the flower archway, waiting for Sailor to arrive. The teasing laughter from his brothers below reached his ears, making him clench his fists involuntarily. Only our Marlon could do it. After dreaming for so many years, his finally marrying his white moonlight, between Herman's precious daughter and the mistress's child, anyone would know which to choose. By the way, Ivy, that simp, didn't show up today. Isn't she usually all over Marlon? They were spewing vulgarities, even planning how to prank Ivy next. Every word made Marlon more and more displeased. When they mocked Ivy as a simp yet again, Marlon couldn't take it anymore and suddenly rushed off the stage. He grabbed the other by the collar and unleashed a brutal beating, fists raining down like a storm, each punch landing with sickening impact. The wedding venue was splattered with blood, and terrified screams erupted instantly from all sides. Marlon's brothers rushed forward to break up the fight. "Marlon, you're going to kill him. Stop it now." Marlon was seeing red. His mind flooded with images of Ivy being humiliated over the years, his heart aching so badly he could barely breathe. "Get out. If I ever hear you speak ill of Ivy again, I swear I'll drive you out of City A." A sharp smack rang out. Sailor, who had rushed over at the sound, stood frozen in place, eyes wide with disbelief. "Marlon, were you just standing up for Ivy?" She stood outside the door, her heart brimming with joy, waiting for the auspicious hour to arrive. She had thought that after today, she would be the happiest woman in all of City A. Yet, to her utter shock, her husband destroyed the wedding venue in front of everyone, all just to stand up for his former lover. Marlon turned slowly, a trace of blood still at the corner of his lips, his entire demeanor exuding both dejection and defiance. Seeing Sailor's tear-filled eyes, he felt nothing but satisfaction. Suddenly raising his voice, "Everyone, today's wedding is cancelled. When I find the real bride, I'll invite you all to the wedding again." Under countless shocked gazes, Marlon left with an air of effortless cool. Marlon. No matter how heartbroken and wretched Sailor's screams were behind him, Marlon's footsteps never faltered, until his figure vanished from everyone's sight. Sailor collapsed completely to the ground. She murmured in a daze, How could this happen? Everything was perfectly fine just moments ago. Marlon, how could he suddenly flee from the wedding, and even claimed he was going to find his true bride? The cheerful piano music came to an abrupt halt as the large screen displaying their wedding photos suddenly went black. The next second, piercing cries of anguish reached everyone's ears. The screen instantly switched to a horrifying scene. It was all Sailor's videos of being bullied while studying abroad. The sailor in the video bore no resemblance to the arrogant and domineering figure she is now. She was dragged into the bathroom, forced to drink toilet water, her beautiful hair hacked unevenly. At its worst, someone even threw a venomous snake into her backpack. Sailor was covered in blood, kneeling and begging for mercy, utterly broken and cowardly. But the tone shifts abruptly when we return to City A, where Sailor is arrogant, rude, and malicious at heart. She transformed from victim to perpetrator. All the tortures once inflicted upon her, she now inflicted upon others, whether illegitimate children of wealthy families or random passers-by who angered her. The most representative victim was Ivy. Whispers spread all around, "Oh my God, who would have thought Sailor could be such a vicious person? Isn't this the classic case of having been drenched by rain, so determined to tear others' umbrellas?" Looking at it this way, actually Sailor is the third party between Marlon and Ivy. How dare she call Ivy the other woman, the icy, Piercing insults nearly shattered her eardrums. Even some wealthy young men she had bullied took advantage of the chaos to throw eggs and food at her. Sailor S' face turned deathly pale as she was forced into a corner. She cried out in anger, "No, I didn't. This video is fake. I'm the victim here." At these words, many wealthy young heirs stepped forward one after another. Personally testifying to her crimes, everyone condemned her with both words and writings. Just as Sailor was on the brink of despair, Mr. Herman arrived at the scene. Her dull grey eyes suddenly brightened. "Dad." What answered her was the sharp sound of a slap, followed by Mr. Herman's angry voice, "You disgrace. Look at what you've done." Mr. Herman threw a thick stack of termination contracts in front of her. They were termination contracts sent by illegitimate children she had bullied, as well as wealthy heirs from less privileged families. What began as a few scattered companies demanding contract cancellations soon escalated, with nearly half of their business partners sending termination agreements. Mr. Herman was so furious he lost all reason, publicly disowning Sailor on the spot. Sailor S' expulsion from the Herman family became widespread news, turning her into a social pariah that everyone despised. For a whole month after that, she could only rely on her mother's support, hiding in a hotel room that never saw daylight. Meanwhile, Marlon manipulated public opinion. Just as he had done with Ivy and her mother before, he lived in constant anxiety every day, anxiously awaiting any news about Ivy. Yet each time, he was utterly disappointed, so he simply immersed himself in the bar, thoroughly enjoying smoking, drinking, and gambling. One drunken night, he received a call from an unknown number. Marlon habitually went to press the reject button but accidentally answered the call instead. He instinctively said hello, but there was only silence on the other end for a long time. Just as I was about to hang up, he seemed to remember something, his alcohol-clouded mind suddenly clearing. "Ivy, is that you? You finally called me. Where are you? I'll come find you." Marlon excitedly rambled on, but there was still no response from the other end, until finally the call was disconnected. Before long, a message came from that unfamiliar number, room 806, Siming Hotel. "I'm waiting for you here." A long-lost joy surged in his heart. Marlon didn't have time to think and immediately headed to the hotel. As soon as he entered, a pair of slender arms wrapped around his waist from behind. "Marlon, I've missed you so much." Marlon felt his scalp tingle instantly, because the voice coming from behind was unmistakably IVS. Just as he was about to turn around, the room suddenly plunged into darkness. Marlon felt his desire flare up violently. He clutched the approaching figure tightly, his voice trembling. "Ivy, I miss you so much too. I'm sorry. I know I was wrong. It was all my fault before. Please come back to me. I was going crazy during the days without you." In the darkness, his kisses came like a tidal wave, his breathing ragged and urgent. Sailor eyes turned red, fingers gripping the edge of the bed so tightly that the knuckles whitened, nails nearly digging into the flesh. She had planned to call Marlon, using a victim strategy to beg for forgiveness, but upon hearing him repeatedly call out Ivy, she froze in place, too afraid to speak. Yet soon, she resolved to impersonate Ivy's identity. Just one night, if she could get pregnant, she could completely escape the gloom of these past days. At this thought, Sailor felt all those humiliations vanish without a trace. She actively responded to Marlon, keeping busy all night. The next day, she rose early again, quietly taking the camera from the table, and Marlon's used condom. City's chaos didn't affect Ivy, who was far away in Vancouver. On her second day in Vancouver, she was taken to the gymnasium by Mr. Michael. She rose to fame young and possessed extraordinary talent. Even during these years back home, though constantly by Marlon's side, she never neglected her intensive training. One could say figure skating was an indispensable part of her life. However, Ivy, being a newcomer and a parachuted reserve player from upper management, inevitably drew envy from other team members. She simply moved out of the dormitory and bought herself an apartment outside. Back then, Marlon would constantly throw money around to humiliate her, and her late mother had also left her a substantial inheritance. Altogether, it amounted to 100 million. It was enough for her to live in this city, driven by an intense desire to qualify for the competition. Ivy trained almost tirelessly for the first 3 months, neglecting food and sleep. Finally, 6 months later, during the team selection trials, she glided gracefully to the beautiful melody, delivering a figure skating performance that won everyone's admiration. Ivy successfully secured her spot in the competition and entered an even more grueling period of closed training. She trained from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day, putting in 2 extra hours of practice compared to others. Even on holidays, she spent her time on the ice rink, barely taking any breaks. A teammate once advised her, "Ivy, you don't have to push yourself so hard, it's exhausting." But Ivy would always smile and say, "The road to success is never smooth sailing." During her figure skating journey, she would get injured, feel anxious, break down, and sometimes even think about giving up. But whenever she remembered her mother's comforting words, "Ivy, you must stay strong," she would grit her teeth and set out once again. 1 year later, Ivy represented the national team in competition and lived up to expectations by winning the championship, retiring with a perfect conclusion. That very evening, the team organized a victory banquet. Ivy also unusually changed out of her team uniform to shop for some proper dresses and skirts at the mall. Come to think of it, this was actually her first time visiting a shopping mall since arriving in Vancouver. The victory celebration wasn't just attended by the figure skating team members. Athletes from other sports disciplines had all gathered here, and even sponsors were present at the scene. But the most dazzling of all was undoubtedly Ivy, dressed in a purple cheongsam, her waterfall-like hair elegantly pinned up with a simple hairpin. Her striking beauty instantly drew countless gazes. Ivy felt somewhat awkward and quietly retreated to sit in a corner, yet this didn't prevent her from receiving countless dance invitations throughout the entire celebration banquet. Ivy simply felt exhausted, so she claimed her back injury hadn't fully recovered and rejected everyone equally. By the latter half of the celebration banquet, Ivy went alone to the rooftop. The gentle night breeze scattered the loose strands of hair across her forehead. While the dazzling stars shone with irresistible allure, Ivy suddenly remembered a legend. They say when people die, they turn into stars, hanging in the sky to watch over those they couldn't let go of in life. So mother, are you sharing in my glory at this very moment? Ivy looked up at the starry sky, her eyes gradually welling up with moisture. After a long while, a suit jacket was draped over her shoulders. Ivy turned her head in surprise and found herself gazing into a pair of eyes that sparkled like stars. The man smiled gently, his voice impossibly pleasant. "Miss, have we met somewhere before?" Ivy found it amusing at heart. She was about to say how outdated this pickup line was when suddenly she realized he looked strikingly familiar. For a moment, even she wanted to ask, "Sir, have we met somewhere before?" seeing her staring blankly at him. The man suddenly grabbed her hand and wrote his name in her palm. "Ivy, I'm Harley, Harley, ever evolving, yet always clear and unchanging." In a daze, the man before her seemed to merge with the face of the neighbor's brother from the depths of her memory. Seeing an old acquaintance again, Ivy's previously gloomy mood vanished completely. "Harley, are you the same Harley brother from back then?" Harley's eyes brimmed with laughter, yet his words carried a hint of playful resentment. "Only just remembered me now." Ivy felt embarrassed by his words and instinctively lowered her gaze. The next moment, Harley asked her, "Want to grab some late-night snacks with me?" As if enchanted by magic, Ivy nodded subconsciously. 15 minutes later, they appeared at a street-side food stall. Ivy was pleasantly surprised. "You still remember I like these?" Harley kept smiling. "I remember everything you like." He seemed to be a regular here. The owner walked up warmly and asked, "Young man, same as last time, right?" Harley responded with an and the owner promptly took away the menu from the table. Ivy felt somewhat puzzled. In her memory, Harley wasn't like this. He would always thoughtfully consider her dietary preferences. Yet for their first meal together after reuniting, he didn't even ask if she had any food restrictions. However, when the restaurant owner served the dishes, Ivy realized she had overthought it. Because Harley had ordered all the dishes she loved in her youth, she recalled his earlier words, "I remember everything you like." Ivy felt warmth in her heart. Noticing Ivy hesitating to pick up her chopsticks, Harley grew nervous. "What's wrong? Don't these dishes suit your taste?" Then he added guiltily, "My fault, I only thought about what you used to love and forgot to ask what you like now." With that, Harley called over the owner and handed the menu to Ivy. Ivy choked up slightly but didn't refuse, ordering a few dishes as well. Harley paused in surprise, because Ivy had ordered all his old favorites. Ivy teased with a playful smile, "We're even now, I only ordered what you used to like." Without asking what you prefer these days, Harley chuckled softly, "Ivy, what I like hasn't changed. What I loved before, I still love now." After that night, they often made plans to attend concerts together and watch games. Ivy unexpectedly discovered that Harley shared her interests. They were practically kindred spirits. At first, she only saw Harley as an older brother and never considered anything beyond that. But as they spent more time together, Harley brought her one heart-fluttering moment after another. All those little details she never noticed, Harley would remember them for her. Even the sense of ritual she felt excluded from, Harley had prepared it all for her. If Marlon was a frivolous breeze, then Harley was the warm sun of spring. Realizing she might have fallen for Harley, Ivy instinctively retreated. She began cutting ties with the outside world, buying a random plane ticket and setting off on a journey. She traversed desolate deserts, witnessing the grandeur of the setting sun over the endless river, to climb the world's highest peaks and gaze down upon the happiness of countless homes, or even venture into war zones as a photographer, capturing image after image of human suffering. 3 months had passed. Ivy still couldn't help but think of Harley. She remembered his gentle voice, his spring-like smile, and those unconscious little gestures of favoritism he always showed her. She couldn't help but stand in her partner's shoes, comparing Harley and Marlon. In the midst of an intense psychological battle, Ivy ultimately chose to buy a plane ticket back to Vancouver. The moment she got off the plane, she eagerly switched back to her original SIM card. During that 1 minute of loading messages, Ivy had already rehearsed 1,000 excuses to explain to Harley. The phone held in my palm quickly grew hot, overwhelmed by countless missed calls and unread messages, all from Harley. Ivy, want to have dinner together today? Ivy, are you busy? Ivy, where have you been? Why haven't you come home for days? Ivy, did I do something wrong to upset you? Ivy, I'm so worried about you. I'm going crazy. Ivy, please reply to me if you see this message. Ivy couldn't believe that Harley had sent her over 20,000 messages. Each one felt like it was slicing open his heart, bluntly telling her, "You're important to me. I can't live without you." A shadow suddenly fell across the space before her. Ivy slowly looked up, only to be abruptly pulled into an embrace. Harley rested her chin on her shoulder, warm breath tickling her neck, sending her heart into disarray. "Ivy, I've missed you so much." His voice was hoarse, as if he hadn't slept through many long nights, but what made Ivy most nervous was the scorching heat radiating from his body. Ivy supported Harley, pressing her fingers to his forehead. It was frighteningly hot. "Harley, hold on, I'm taking you to the hospital." But Harley stubbornly clung to her. "Promise me first you won't disappear without a word again." "Fine, I promise." Half an hour later, Harley lay exhausted on the hospital bed, yet never loosened his grip on her hand. The assistant beside her spoke politely. "Ms. Ivy, could we speak privately?" Ivy followed the assistant to the stairwell. "What did you want to say?" Her intuition told her the assistant's next words would contain the answer she sought. "Ms. Ivy, you'll understand many things after looking through this photo album." She opened the album in confusion. It was filled with photos of her younger self with Harley, showing her in various moments. Every photo's back was covered in dense handwriting, each line overflowing with Harley's sincere love for her. For 8 long years, she was the only one he ever loved. Tears had long blurred her vision. Ivy asked with a trembling voice, "Then why didn't he come looking for me all these years? If Harley had found her earlier, would her and her mother's lives have been different?" The assistant regretfully said, "After you moved away, President Harley became emotionally distraught and his congenital heart disease relapsed. The chairman and his wife were worried about him, so they brought him back to Vancouver for treatment. During that time, Mr. Harley also suffered greatly, not only searching for news about you every day but also undergoing treatment. Everyone thought he wouldn't last more than a month, yet he managed to hold on year after year, relying solely on your photo. Fortunately, Mr. Harley finally received a suitable heart donor last year, and the surgery was very successful." The assistant continued speaking at length, but Ivy could no longer make out the words. Clutching the photo album, she returned to the hospital room and kept vigil by Harley's side without leaving for a moment. Looking at his pale lips and slightly haggard face, Ivy's guilt reached its peak. "What are you crying for?" Harley had woken up at some point, smiling as he wiped away her tears. "Ivy, don't blame yourself, you're wonderful." At this moment, Ivy felt all those cheesy romantic drama plots paled in comparison. She threw herself into Harley's arms, her tears soaking his shirt as she murmured, "I should have told you sooner how I felt." After that day, they naturally got together. Compared to Ivy's peaceful and happy life, City A had already been thrown into chaos. The cause was Sailor storming into the Newman family's home with a pregnancy test report. Making her pregnancy known to everyone, the Newman family's company stocks plummeted overnight, drawing Mr. Newman's attention. Without hesitation, he sent someone to bring Marlon home and punished him by making him kneel in the ancestral hall for reflection. But before long, Marlon suddenly fainted and was rushed to the hospital. When the doctor announced that Marlon had lost his fertility due to excessive alcoholism, Mr. Newman's face turned extremely grim. The next day, he invited the Herman family to the old mansion. Listening to Mr. Newman's generous offer, Mr. Herman scoffed. "Mr. Newman, my daughter is carrying the last hope of your Newman family, and you think these trivial things can appease me?" As soon as the words fell, Sailor was the first to lose composure. She anxiously tried to stop Mr. Herman, but was silenced by a single authoritative glare from Mr. Herman. Sailor instantly fell silent. She truly had no desire to relive those days of hardship and displacement. Mr. Newman, having weathered many storms himself, cast a disdainful glance at Sailor's belly. "This is all the Newman family can offer. If you're not afraid of your daughter being ridiculed throughout City A for getting pregnant before marriage, go ahead and refuse." His triumphant expression was a brutal slap to Sailor's face. People used to say Ivy was Marlon's ultimate simp, but if word of today's events gets out, it'll probably be Sailor who earns that title instead. Sailor swallowed her humiliation and clenched her teeth as she signed the contract on the table. "Uncle, as long as you can make Marlon marry me, I don't need anything else." Her sudden outburst angered Herman's parents, who immediately left in fury. Mr. Newman flashed a shrewd smile in his cloudy eyes and theatrically patted Sailor's shoulder. "Good, I like women like Sailor who don't put on airs." Just as he was about to sign, Marlon's voice suddenly rang out from upstairs. "I disagree." Marlon no longer bore any resemblance to his former glorious self, his entire being haggard beyond recognition. He stumbled down the stairs in a frenzy, tearing the marriage alliance agreement to shreds without a second thought. "Dad, in this lifetime, I will marry no one but Ivy." Mr. Newman slapped him angrily across the face. "You unfilial son, Sailor is carrying your child. Do you really want to stand by and watch the Newman family lineage die out?" Marlon licked the blood at the corner of his mouth with a sickening grin, suddenly laughing. "What do I care whether the Newman family lives or dies? When you drove my mother abroad back then, why didn't you consider the dignity of the Newman family?" Then, he glanced at Sailor's stomach again. "Besides, with a loose woman like her, who knows which bastard's child she's carrying?" Hearing this, Sailor felt all her hopes torn apart as if by a blunt knife. She never expected that the man she loved so deeply would think of her this way. "Marlon," she roared, striding up to Marlon, "how could you say such things about me? The baby in my belly is yours. If you don't believe me, I can show you the video." As she spoke, Sailor pulled out her phone, trying to find the hotel footage from that night, but Marlon impatiently knocked her phone to the ground. "Sailor, you'd better pray this child isn't mine, otherwise, I'll never let it see the day it's born." The icy, venomous words pierced her heart deeply. Sailor collapsed to the ground instantly. "Why, Marlon, why would you do this to me? We were about to get married. How could you suddenly fall in love with Ivy?" She still couldn't understand it. Marlon had loathed Ivy to the core. How could he change overnight? But the thought that her people had already buried Ivy alive sent Sailor into a fit of hysterical laughter. "So what if you suddenly fell in love with Ivy? She's long dead. I had her buried alive." Marlon glared at her darkly. "You probably don't know this yet, but the people you sent never even found Ivy." As soon as he heard the news that Sailor had sent people to bury Ivy alive, Marlon had his assistant track them down. The report came back that when they arrived at the gravesite, Ivy's figure was nowhere to be seen. It seemed like Sailor was being made to give up hope. As Marlon dialed the numbers of those assassins, "Marlon, please stop contacting us. We're not lying to you. Ivy ran away on her own. We never even saw her." Sailor instantly turned deathly pale. But what devastated her most was the sudden call from her assistant. "Mr. Marlon, we've found Ivy's whereabouts." Marlon's long-dormant heart finally stirred as he hastily opened the message from his assistant. It was a video from an international figure skating competition. In the footage, Ivy glided gracefully across the ice like a noble white swan, even bending to kiss the rink after her performance. Her entire being radiant, Marlon was overwhelmed with complex emotions. Deep in his memory, a sudden flashback appeared of Ivy's early rise to fame in her youth. That brilliant girl who shone so brightly on the ice rink. He had forced her to give up her chance to join the national team. Marlon had even uttered the most vile words to her. "I want to ruin your future and pride. You'll rot in the mud for the rest of your life." To this day, he still remembers Ivy's face turning deathly pale with despair in an instant. The satisfaction he felt then is matched only by the regret he feels now. Ignoring everyone's attempts to stop him, Marlon ordered his assistant, "Quick, prepare the private jet. I need to see her immediately." But just as he was rushing to leave, a sharp pain suddenly shot through the back of his head. With a loud bang, glass shards flew everywhere. Marlon slowly turned his head, his eyes filled with disbelief and disappointment, because the one who had thrown it at him was none other than the father he had once respected most. Yet Mr. Newman coldly scolded him without a trace of emotion. The dignity of the Newman family must never be tarnished by your hands. Before the world plunged into darkness, Marlon heard Mr. Newman order the servants to lock him in his room. Meanwhile, Sailor became the rightful Mrs. Shun. When he woke again, Marlon found himself chained by the ankle like a dog, confined to a storage room without even a window. No matter how desperately he screamed, no one would pay him any heed. The only people who came regularly were the servants delivering 3 meals a day, and the still relentless Sailor. Marlon lay exhausted on the ground, his body covered in bruises from struggling to escape. Sailor tenderly touched his wounds, pleading humbly, "Marlon, I beg you, stop tormenting yourself. That woman Ivy isn't worth it. Your uncle has already publicly declared that I am your wife. No matter how much you resist, he won't change his mind." Sailor's eyes brimmed with tears. Her heart filled with desolation. She hadn't been without resentment. Marlon had once wanted to kill her for Ivy, but her love for him was genuine. Marlon turned his head away, unwilling to spare him even a glance. Get lost. His eyes were dull as wood, his entire body exuding the putrid stench of a dying man. These past days, Marlon had thought a great deal. For example, how to escape this soul-crushing home, and how could he possibly see Ivy again, if he did see Ivy? How could he convince her to stay? As he pondered, he began to empathize with the Ivy of the past. Being trapped in hell must be agonizing, right? Seeing his obstinate demeanor, Sailor was thoroughly enraged. She opened a news article and threw her phone in front of Marlon, deliberately provoking him. "Marlon, open your eyes and take a good look. The person you've been pining for has long been engaged to another man behind your back." Marlon instantly snapped awake upon clearly seeing the news photo, his knuckles turning white as he gripped his phone, his voice trembling with shock. "No, this can't be. You must be lying to me. Ivy loves me so much. How could she possibly marry another man? She once told me I should marry her someday, that she could only ever be mine." */slap**. Marlon smashed his phone in a fit of rage, his sharp gaze locking onto Sailor before suddenly seizing her by the throat. "Speak, all of this is fake. You've all conspired to deceive me, haven't you?" Sailor flushed crimson, instinctively slapping at his hand. "Marlon, let go of me. I'm carrying our child in my womb." But her words only fueled Marlon's rage. "If it weren't for you, Ivy would never have left me. She must have found out about your pregnancy. Why else would she spite me by being with another man?" "Yes, that's exactly it. That's exactly what happened." Marlon flung Sailor out of the room like a madman, then heartlessly kicked her down the stairs. Sailor tumbled down to the 2nd floor. Though she desperately shielded her belly, she couldn't escape the fate of miscarriage. Blood streamed continuously from her calves as excruciating cramps tore through her lower abdomen, drenching her body in cold sweat. "It hurts. Someone, please, someone help me." The servants in the courtyard rushed over at the sound, only to be stunned by the sight of blood everywhere. In the end, it was the bodyguard who called an ambulance to take Sailor away. Marlon seized the chaos to escape, speeding to the airport overnight. Even after a minor car accident along the way, he stumbled forward, determined to see Ivy. The moment he boarded the plane, Marlon's long frustrated mood vanished. Replaced by absolute confidence in winning Ivy back, he would show Ivy's photo to everyone, declaring, "This is my wife." The well-wishes from strangers pleased him greatly, allowing him to delude himself into believing he and Ivy were truly married. It wasn't until he landed in Vancouver and arrived at Ivy's apartment that Marlon realized the news reports were all true. Ivy was indeed getting married. Marlon furiously stepped forward and shoved Harley, breaking down as he yelled, "Get the hell out, she's mine." When she saw who had arrived, Ivy's expression darkened, her brows furrowing. "Marlon, what are you doing here, at this time? Shouldn't he be back in the country preparing for his wedding with Sailor? Why had he suddenly come here looking for her?" Before she could make sense of the situation, Marlon suddenly grabbed her wrist, urgently trying to pull her away. "Ivy, don't be afraid, I'll take you back home right now." Ivy broke free from his grip, bewildered. "Marlon, what on earth has gotten into you?" She walked over to Harley and asked with concern, "Are you okay?" Harley smiled and shook his head. "I'm fine." With that, he turned to face Marlon, his expression instantly turning cold. "Let me introduce myself. My name is Harley, and I'm Ivy's fiancé." Long ago, Harley had investigated Marlon, only to find he was a complete scumbag through and through. Ivy's life was half ruined by him. Before he could avenge Ivy, Marlon came knocking first. The sky was eerily ominous. half gloomy and half clear, as if foreboding a violent storm. Marlon was about to respond to his provocation when Ivy cut off the exchange with a frosty expression. "Marlon, this isn't where you belong. Please leave." She then turned to take Harley's hand, smiling tenderly. Let's go home. I won't allow this." Marlon blocked the doorway like a rabid dog, but when he met Ivy's icy gaze, he was instantly humbled to the dust, pleading desperately, "Ivy, I know I was wrong. I went too far before. Can you ever forgive me? I'll apologize however you want, just name it, and I'll make it happen for you. Haven't you always wanted to marry me? I'm allowing you to marry me now." Marlon thought Ivy was just throwing a temporary tantrum with him. As long as he properly apologized and sweet-talked her a bit, they could make up and let bygones be bygones, but he failed to see even a trace of anticipation on Ivy's face. Instead, the disgust in her eyes seemed lethal. Ivy first gently negotiated with Harley. "Let me handle this matter." Then, without hesitation, she turned and slapped Marlon across the face before immediately calling security to have him removed. Finally, she instructed the security guards, "Remember this man's face. If he comes back, call the police and have him arrested immediately." She refused to exchange even a single word with him, let alone forgiveness. Ivy, Marlon watched helplessly as the woman he loved walked home hand in hand with another man. His throat hoarse from shouting, yet Ivy never once turned her head. Amidst lightning and thunder, a torrential downpour began to fall. Marlon staggered down the street in a daze, with everyone avoiding him as if he were a madman. Occasionally, passers-by would approach to ask if he needed help, but instead of appreciating their kindness, he would beat them up. In the end, he was locked up in prison for a month. By the time he was released, he had become so emaciated he was barely recognizable. He opened his phone, only to find the internet flooded with news about Saylor's miscarriage. Watching the interview video where Saylor broke down in tears, accusing him of his crimes, Marlon felt utterly satisfied. After a year, he logged into his Twitter account again and updated his status. "Evil will be punished by heaven." Back in the homeland, Saylor quickly tracked Marlon's location through his social media activity. That very night, she flew to Vancouver. Saylor didn't confront Marlon directly, but instead went straight to Ivy. 10 million, leave Marlon. A bank card was thrown in front of Ivy. While Saylor didn't even bother to take off his sunglasses, his arrogance undisguised, Ivy stared at the bank card on the table and couldn't help but laugh. When her mother died, Marlon gave her 10 million as hush money, to preserve the Newman family's reputation. Now Saylor was offering her another 10 million, to buy her lifelong happiness. 10 million. It truly seems like a watershed, separating poverty from wealth, and distinguishing right from wrong. Saylor frowned with displeasure. "What are you laughing at? Do you think this 1,000 isn't enough, or do you want more?" Just like Marlon, the same condescending attitude, Ivy sneered. "You and Marlon are truly a perfect match." Saylor didn't catch her underlying meaning, thinking she was just money-grubbing, and was feeling quite smug, but the next second, Ivy pushed the card on the table back and spoke indifferently. "You should leave. Whether Marlon stays or goes isn't up to me." Upon hearing this, Saylor flushed with anger. "Ivy, are you showing off to me how Marlon is hopelessly devoted to you? You're just the daughter of a mistress. What right do you have to stand by Marlon's side?" Slap. Before she could finish, Saylor was abruptly slapped across the face. Ivy's emotionless eyes finally showed a ripple. "I told you. My mother is not a mistress. If I hear you slander my mother again, I'll sue you for defamation." With that, she picked up her bag and turned to leave. Saylor couldn't contain her rage. She grabbed the scalding teapot from the table and raised it to hurl at Ivy's retreating head. At that very moment, the cafe door burst open violently. "Watch out!" Harley rushed over swiftly, instinctively shielding Ivy in her arms. A muffled scream rang in her ears, and Ivy's heart clenched as she hurriedly checked Harley's injuries, only to find Harley completely unharmed. While the scream had come from Marlon's mouth, scalding hot water nearly covered his face, streaming down from his forehead to his neck, its heat intense enough to peel off a layer of Marlon's skin. His features twisted in pain as he curled up on the ground, wailing in agony, yet still looked expectantly at Ivy. Marlon had even prepared words of comfort for her, but never received so much as a glance in return. The same Ivy who once gazed at him with adoration was now fussing over another man. A crushing sense of defeat pierced his heart. Marlon had to admit, Ivy truly didn't love him anymore. Marlon watched helplessly as Ivy left with Harley, his heart aching as if hollowed out. Saylor stood frozen in shock, only remembering to make a call after what felt like an eternity. She threw herself beside Marlon, her trembling hands reaching toward his wounds. But the moment she touched his skin, Marlon winced in pain with a sharp inhale, startling her into panic. "Marlon, I'm sorry, I didn't know it was you. But why did you have to shield that bitch from the hot water? Wouldn't it be better if she just died?" Sailor grew angrier the more she thought about it, her jealousy burning away all reason as she hurled cruel words without regard for Marlon's injuries, until Marlon could no longer hold back, growling through clenched teeth in pain, "Get out." Sailor only then realized that Marlon's wounds had begun to fester, and Marlon blacked out, collapsing unconscious. When he awoke again, Marlon found his face tightly wrapped in bandages, leaving only a pair of eyes and nostrils exposed. It could be said that his face was completely disfigured, ruined. Everything is ruined. Ivy loved this face of mine the most. She'll never like me again. What meaning does my life have now? He smashed everything breakable in the hospital room like a madman, his eyes brimming with resentment and frenzy. The assistant cautiously handed him a contract, head bowed low. "Marlon, the chairman says his severing father-son ties with you. You're no longer the heir to the Newman family conglomerate. This contract serves as proof of your disownment." His voice grew increasingly hushed. Terrified that Marlon might lash out in his madness and hurt him, sure enough, Marlon was filled with fury, tearing the contract to shreds in a fit of rage. "The Newman family group was built by my mother single-handedly. How dare he just revoke my position as heir, without me? Who else could possibly inherit the Newman family group?" He roared, he raged, he broke down. This was the darkest moment of his life he had never experienced before, the assistant said matter-of-factly. "The chairman has recently been planning to support the next heir, rumored to be an illegitimate child raised outside, about the same age as you," like bombs detonating in his ears. Marlon was stunned. Overnight, streaks of white appeared at his temples. Marlon saw all his pride and confidence crumble away in that moment. Outside the hospital room door came Ivy's sweet voice. She was accompanying Harley to complete the discharge procedures. Her clinging demeanor like a poisoned needle that pierced deeply into Marlon's heart. It was as if he saw the Ivy from many years ago again. The girl's ponytail was tied high, her face radiant with an innocent smile, batting her watery sailor eyes as she called to him, "Marlon, I hope you stay safe and sound for the rest of your life." That was the look of being favored, just like now. Ivy gazes at Harley with a smile. Marlon gave up, instructing his assistant. "Liquidate all the properties under my name and transfer the funds to Ivy's account." Every time he transferred money to her before, it was meant to humiliate her. Who would have thought that this time, it was to fulfill her wishes? But the day after the money was transferred, Marlon saw the news. Ivy had donated all the money he gave her to the Women and Children Protection Association. During an interview, Ivy earnestly said, "Women's safety and child protection truly need to be seen by society. Here, I implore every woman and child suffering to save themselves from dire circumstances." The resounding words seemed more like a declaration to herself. Ivy had moist eyes, feeling immensely grateful she had persevered through it all. Stepping out of the interview room, Ivy spotted Harley in the crowd at first glance. He walked toward her with a smile, draping a coat over her shoulders as his warm hand enveloped hers. "Let's go, I'll take you to dinner." The car sped along and finally came to a stop at the entrance of the Harley family's old residence. Ivy looked puzzled. "How did you?" "To be honest, it's quite embarrassing. We've been together for so long, even engaged, and I still haven't introduced you to my parents." Harley smiled warmly as he took out numerous gifts from the car trunk. "Don't worry, everything you need has been prepared for you. It's just a meal with them, no need to be nervous." Hearing him say this, Ivy felt her nervousness ease considerably, as if an anchor had steadied her heart. Harley's parents were very warm and showed no airs of being from a wealthy family, especially Mrs. Harley, who held Ivy's hand and chatted with her for a long time about family matters. As they were about to leave, Mrs. Harley even took her to the study and solemnly handed her an embroidered box. "This bracelet was passed down to me by grandmother, and now I'm passing it on to you, child. You and HA have suffered so much along this journey." Harley's mom's eyes brimmed with almost overflowing tenderness. Ivy sniffled, her eyes suddenly reddening. "Thank you, Auntie." She could clearly distinguish between genuine affection and feigned kindness. It was precisely because of this that Ivy thought of her mother again. In the past, her mother had been the same way, eager to lay all the world's rare treasures at her feet. No matter how accomplished or formidable she was in the outside world, her mother always ached for the hardships she had endured. Returning to her apartment that night, Ivy lay awake for a long time, noticing her low spirits. Harley asked with concern, "What's wrong?" Did my mom say something that upset you? No. Ivy shook her head. I just think your mother was right. You, me, us, we've been through too much hardship. Whether it was her own unspeakable past or Harley's past constantly threatened by death, it's all too bitter. Even if suffering blossoms into flowers, I wish I had never experienced it. Ivy suddenly hugged Harley and said solemnly, "H.A., let's get married." Harley froze for a moment. Why so sudden? Probably, I just wanted too much to have a home with you. Upon learning Ivy was getting married to Harley in a month, Marlon shut himself away for 3 days. During this time, no matter how Sailor tried to coax him, he couldn't even be bothered to spare her a glance. Sailor had never suffered such humiliation in her life. What's more, Marlon had gone bankrupt, been disfigured, and even transferred his affections to someone else. She asked herself honestly, it was already remarkable that she had cared for him this long. These days, Sitia's sisters kept sending messages to persuade her to return, appealing to both her emotions and reason. Even Mrs. Herman advised her. "Sailor, you're still so young, with looks, figure, and education that are second to none. Why chain your whole life to a good-for-nothing like Marlon? Listen to your mother and stop being so stubborn. Whether it's an arranged marriage or building a career, come back to City A." Yet she remained obstinate, refusing to turn back even after hitting the wall, determined to walk this single-plank bridge to the bitter end, seeing Marlon still showing no intention of acknowledging her. Sailor's self-esteem completely collapsed. She violently smashed the lunchbox in her hand, rushed up to Marlon and roared, "Marlon, can't you even turn around to look at me? There's more than just Ivy in this world. I'm the one who truly loves you. Why do you have to treat me like this?" She slowly slid down against the wall, covering her face as she wept bitterly. "I've had enough. I've really had enough." No matter how she cried and screamed, Marlon remained indifferent. He could even ignore Sailor's crying and lie down to sleep as if no one else was around, turn Sailor into a shrew who makes a disgraceful spectacle of herself. Staring at Marlon's heartless retreating figure, Sailor's resentment toward you, Ivy, grew fiercer by the moment. The television was still broadcasting Ivy's upcoming marriage to the heir of the Harley family. Everything was mocking her incompetence. She took a deep look at Marlon, and a bold, almost insane decision surfaced in her heart. The next day, Ivy had just sent Harley off to work and was about to catch some more sleep when the doorbell rang. Ivy reluctantly went to open the door. "Did you forget your keys again?" "Huh, who are you?" A group of burly men instantly knocked her unconscious. 2 hours later, Ivy found herself in an abandoned factory, her body strapped with explosives. Even more terrifying, the bomb was counting down. In just half an hour, she would be blown to pieces in this desolate place. "Help, is anyone there? Help." But no matter how hoarse her cries became, the only response was the echo bouncing off the factory walls. Just as she was on the brink of despair, the door was violently kicked open. Sailor swaggered in triumphantly and immediately delivered a fierce slap. "You bitch, if it weren't for you seducing Marlon, I would have married him long ago. It's all because of you that Marlon has become this wretched, half-human half-ghost mess." She was extremely agitated, her chest heaving violently with anger. Ivy tried to steady her emotions. "Sailor, calm down, you still have a bright future ahead of you. Why waste yourself on a scoundrel like Marlon?" But these words only enraged Sailor further, causing Ivy to receive another slap. "Hypocrite, everyone else can tell me to pull back from the brink and turn over a new leaf. But you're the last person qualified to say that. Ivy, before you came along, do you know how much Marlon loved me, Sailor Marlon?" But with every word she spoke, the bomb's countdown ticked faster. Ivy was so anxious that sweat poured down her face, her fear and longing growing exponentially in her heart. Fearful that life is about to end, missing the time spent with Harley, with only 10 minutes left on the countdown, Marlon and Harley's voices came from the doorway. "Let her go." Seeing Ivy covered in bombs, Harley felt her blood run cold. "Ivy, stay back," Sailor sharply warned the two, clutching a remote control in her hand. "One step closer and I'll detonate the bomb." Hearing this, Harley and Marlon froze in their tracks. Marlon darkened his expression. "Sailor, what the hell are you trying to do?" "What am I trying to do?" Sailor suddenly burst into maniacal laughter. "I just want to grow old with you and never be apart." "Of course, Marlon. As long as you promise to marry me and love only me for the rest of your life, I'll let Ivy go." Marlon hesitated for a moment before agreeing. "Fine, I'll marry you. Now release Ivy." Seemingly triggered by the name Ivy, Sailor suddenly snapped. "Stop right there, Marlon. Do you really think I'd believe your lies again?" She threw a contract at Marlon's feet, then immediately fed another pill to Ivy. Sign this agreement and swear your lifelong loyalty to me alone, otherwise. Ivy will die from the poison when she can't get my antidote. The pill I just gave her is a deadly poison I specially had someone bring from the northwest region. If the antidote is not taken on time, Ivy will bleed from all 7 orifices and die a sudden, violent death. With the bomb's countdown down to its final 2 minutes, Marlon didn't dare hesitate and decisively signed the agreement, while Sailor was distracted examining the contract. Harley swiftly kicked the remote control out of her hand. Immediately after, he untied Ivy at the fastest speed possible. The alarm blared deafeningly, yet the countdown had only 30 seconds remaining. At the critical moment, Marlon suddenly tackled Sailor to the ground. "Hurry, take Ivy away." Destined to be archenemies, Harley and Marlon displayed an uncanny at this moment. Because they shared the same goal, to protect Ivy, Harley didn't hesitate for a second, pulling Ivy toward the door. Fortunately, they escaped the danger zone just 1 second before the explosion, but Marlon and Sailor remained forever in those ruins. Only after confirming their safety did Ivy frantically examine the wounds on Harley. Tears welled up in her eyes, filled with the terror of a narrow escape. "I'm sorry. It's my fault you got dragged into this mess." The moment she saw Harley charge into the factory, Ivy felt fear like never before. She had already lost the person she loved most once and didn't want to endure such pain a second time. Perhaps heaven heard her prayers. They narrowly escaped death. Harley gently wiped away the tears from the corner of her eye and softly comforted her. "Ivy, this isn't your fault. You don't need to apologize to me. The one at fault is Sailor. Those who hurt you. You shouldn't feel guilty for others' mistakes." For the next 3 days, Ivy and Harley shuttled back and forth between the hospital and the police station every day. After the case was closed, Ivy went to the police station once more. "Ms. Ivy, the deceased Marlon listed you as his emergency contact. Currently, we can't reach his family. Would you be willing to claim his body?" This time, Ivy felt neither anger nor sorrow. She calmly claimed Marlon's body and arranged a dignified funeral for him. Let all past love and hatred fade away now, because of Marlon's funeral. Marlon, the wedding of Ivy and Harley was postponed for half a year. During these 6 months, Ivy replanned her career path. Though she retired, her passion for figure skating never ceased. Thus, Ivy began preparing for the certification exams to become a judge and coach. 3 months later, she topped the exams and was appointed as a coach for the national team. Regarding this, Harley would proudly tell everyone, "My beloved is a hero who brings glory to our country." Harley's parents would proudly tell everyone they met, "Our daughter-in-law is a world champion." Soon, the entire upper-class circle had heard of Ivy. Some were even curious about Ivy, the wealthy heiress, and went out of their way to investigate her past experiences in China, instantly becoming her fans. That wealthy heiress even posted a lengthy essay on Twitter, laying out the chain of evidence to clear the names of Ivy and Mrs. Lemoyne. The Newman family's corporate stocks plummeted overnight, ultimately pushing them to the brink of bankruptcy. Ivy finally saw the fairness and justice she had longed for restored to their rightful course, yet she couldn't help sighing sincerely. "Only when you succeed do you find good people around you." Harley gently booped her nose with a laugh. "Silly, don't be so pessimistic." The wedding day arrived swiftly, in the hotel that had been booked and decorated half a year in advance. Ivy sat before the dressing mirror in her pristine white wedding gown, gazing at her reflection adorned with bridal makeup, lost in thought. On this very day many years ago, Ivy had completely given up on love, never daring to hope she would one day wear a wedding dress and marry the man she loved. Countless sleepless nights had even brought her thousands of fleeting thoughts of ending it all. Without exception, she endured through it all, because there was always a voice in her heart guiding her. Be strong, be brave, be happy. So she endured for many years, until happiness finally arrived. "Ivy, are you ready?" The door behind her opened, and she turned to see it was Harley. His handsome face wore an exceedingly gentle smile, his eyes sparkling as they gazed unblinkingly at her. "Ivy, you're beautiful." Ivy felt slightly embarrassed but still teased deliberately. "Am I only beautiful today?" Harley shook his head and said earnestly, "Ivy is always beautiful, but today in your wedding dress, you're 3 times more stunning. Just thinking that you're really going to marry me makes me feel like my long-cherished dream is about to come true. Ivy, you know what? I liked you from the very first moment I saw you." Gazing at his sincere and earnest face, Ivy felt both sweetness and sorrow in her heart, unable to resist recalling those words from Mrs. Harley. "Child, you and HA have suffered so much along this journey. Fortunately, the bitterness has finally given way to sweetness." "Ready?" Harley asked softly. "Once we step through this door, You'll officially be my bride." Ivy looked at the nervous man before her and willingly placed her hand in his. Harley smiled knowingly as he took her hand and led her forward. The wedding march began to play as the grand doors slowly opened, the couple walking hand in hand toward the outside world. Guests lining both sides of the red carpet whispered among themselves, "What a perfect match, truly a talented scholar and a beautiful lady, a world champion and a wealthy heir. Now that's a storybook romance. I heard they had eyes for each other many years ago. Who would have thought they'd circle back and end up together? This must be fate's perfect arrangement for them." Amidst the cheers of the crowd, they exchanged rings, embraced, and kissed, as the final wedding ritual concluded. Harley suddenly took the pastor's microphone and publicly announced the results of their prenuptial asset verification. He transferred all assets under his name to Ivy's ownership. "Ivy, though this might seem tasteless, I still want to give you the very best I can offer. Thank you for fighting your way to my side." The entire room erupted in murmurs, but only Ivy knew that what moved her more than this property notarization was Harley's all-or-nothing love. He was proving to the world that everything he had belonged to her. Amidst the roaring crowd, Ivy gazed at the sky outside the window. "Mom, look, there's one more person in this world who loves me." The end.